You are listening to the erotic romance audiobook titled Hearts on Fire, A Forbidden Desire. Get ready to be swept away by a tale of passion, secrets, and forbidden longing. Season 1, Chapter 1, Shadows of the Past. The warm California sun poured over the rooftops of a grand estate nestled in the hills of Bel Air. The estate, a modern mansion dressed in stone and glass, stood like a silent witness to the legacy of the man who owned it, Mr. Alejandro Pablo, a name that echoed with wealth, seduction, and complicated love. Mr. Pablo was in his early 50s, tall and silver-streaked, with a commanding presence that aged like his best wines, richer, stronger, and more intoxicating with time. Owner of one of LA's most famous restaurants, a luxury perfume empire, and international interests in oil and mining, Alejandro Pablo was a man of great taste, great wealth, and greater secrets. He stood on his balcony, sipping a crystal glass of vintage red, watching the horizon with a heavy heart. Not because of business, not because of money, but because of the one thing money couldn't fix: his son, Juan Manuel Pablo. Juan, now in his early 30s, had grown into the very image of his father: tall, athletic, strikingly handsome, a magnetic presence. But unlike his father, Juan's eyes carried a quiet torment, the kind that beauty could not soothe, the kind of pain that began long ago when Juan lost two things that shaped his world: his mother, Isabella Ruiz de Pablo, and his first love, Barbara. Isabella, Alejandro's first and only wife, had died of heart complications at 44. A kind woman, refined and loving, who had once tamed even the wildest parts of Mr. Pablo. But Alejandro's insatiable need for passion, for new women, young women, many women, had eroded their bond. It was not violence that tore the family apart, but betrayal. Isabella's heart gave out slowly, one heartbreak at a time, and Juan never forgave his father for it. He blamed Alejandro for her death, not directly, not publicly, but deeply, quietly, and Alejandro knew it. Though he had tried to be a good father, present, supportive, even warm, the ghost of his infidelity loomed over every father-son moment. Alejandro had children outside his marriage. Some he supported, some he never even knew. Women from his past had vanished with children he might never meet. And despite his attempts to be responsible financially, emotionally, he was a storm, always blowing through lives, never staying long enough to rebuild what he destroyed. Juan, on the other hand, had grown up in the privilege of wealth, but the poverty of emotional stability. His mother's death, the tragedy of Barbara, his first love, lost in a sudden car crash at 17. A promising athlete in college, Juan buried his grief in sports and academic pursuits, earning a business degree. But he never recovered fully. He never truly loved again. Now, he lived like a man sleepwalking through life. One-night stands, empty parties, polite rejections. Women fell hard for him. He never chased them. But he was incapable of giving more. Like his father, he was a ladies' man. Unlike his father, he didn't enjoy it. He didn't know how to say no. But he always said, "Don't fall in love with me." And they always did. This chapter would end on a powerful line that hints at the story's romantic and erotic turn. And somewhere across the city, a woman named Desiree Morales, beautiful, brilliant, and unknowingly on a collision course with two men bound by blood and broken hearts, was about to step into the world of the Pablos and change everything.
Chapter 2. The Woman with Fire in Her Eyes. The sun was already fading behind the skyline as Desiree Morales stepped out of the glass building on 7th Avenue, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, her purse tucked securely under her arm. Another job interview, another condescending smile from a male executive who seemed more interested in how she looked than what she could do. She wasn't surprised anymore. At 31, Desiree Morales had learned how to live with disappointment and how to survive it. Born and raised in a small community in Miami, Desiree never knew her father, and she never cared to. Her mother, Camila Morales, was everything: mother, father, protector, provider. Camila worked 2 jobs most of her life, cleaning homes by day and working the front desk of a low-end motel by night. She gave Desiree everything she could with little more than grit, hope, and aching feet. Desiree was brilliant and resilient. She earned her way into a nursing program at a reputable university, determined to make her mother proud. But when Camila fell gravely ill, stage 4 cancer, it changed everything. Desiree dropped out midway through her 2nd year. She was 20 and terrified, but she never let her mother see that. She cared for her day and night, watching the woman who raised her wither away until she was gone. Camila died at 45. Desiree was left with no family, no degree, and barely enough money to afford rent. But even in that grief, she refused to give up. She was a fighter, always had been. She taught herself office management skills, administrative tools, and basic finance. She was the kind of woman who could be hired as a receptionist and be running payroll in 2 months. But she kept quitting. Every new job came with the same price: unwanted advances, friendly male supervisors who made it clear that promotions and job security came with expectations. She wouldn't trade dignity for dollars. So she walked away, again and again. Still, she believed something better was out there, something different. And that belief, however fragile, was still alive the day she bumped into Alejandro Pablo. It wasn't anything romantic at first, just a chance meeting outside a downtown firm. He had noticed her while stepping into his car, a beautiful woman with tired eyes but a proud spine. He asked if she was okay. She replied, "I've had better days." That made him smile. Alejandro offered to buy her lunch. "I know this might be strange," he said with a gentleman's confidence, "but I have an eye for talent. And something tells me you're exactly what I've been looking for." She was suspicious, but something about his presence made her hesitate. He wasn't hitting on her, not exactly. He was charming, yes, but polite. She agreed to the lunch. What followed was not an interview, not exactly, but a conversation. He asked about her education, her past jobs, her mother. He didn't flinch at the hard truths. He didn't interrupt. He listened. That impressed her. He offered her a role, on the spot, at one of his companies. Pablo Luxe, a high-end cosmetic and fragrance brand known for its celebrity clientele and sleek international image. He wanted her to start in finance. Chief finance, to be exact. She almost choked on her coffee. "You don't know anything about me," she said. He smiled. "I know you're tired of being underestimated, and I trust my instincts." She didn't say yes immediately, but 3 days later, she walked through the doors of Pablo Luxe in a tailored navy dress, heels higher than usual, and the same fire in her eyes she had since childhood. That was how it began. In 6 months, Desiree revolutionized the financial operations of Pablo Luxe. She reorganized budgets, streamlined reporting, slashed unnecessary expenses, and tripled quarterly profit margins. She worked late, kept clean boundaries, and never asked Alejandro for favors. She was discreet, efficient, and respected by the staff. And Alejandro watched. He visited the office less often, but when he did, he always made time for her. Sometimes they shared lunch. Other times, he left a note or a small gift. Books on finance, vintage pens, a bracelet once. Never too intimate, never overstepping. But enough to make her wonder. Desiree wasn't naive. She knew he was drawn to her. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, how his voice softened when they spoke. And truthfully, she was drawn to him too. Yes, he was older, almost 20 years her senior, but Alejandro Pablo was a striking man. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly tailored suits. He smelled like leather and sandalwood. His hands were large and strong, his gaze sharp and magnetic. But it wasn't just that. He respected her, and in her world, that was more rare than money. She told herself it was just professional. Until it wasn't. After a year of working under him, being trusted, paid generously, and treated like a partner, Alejandro invited her to dinner, a quiet, private place. He didn't ask for anything, just wanted to talk, he said. She went. That night, he gave her a pearl necklace and thanked her for changing his company. She said thank you. He didn't kiss her, just held her hand for a moment and said, "I've never met anyone like you, Desiree. You remind me of who I could have been if I'd made better choices." She didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet, but she wanted to. He told her he had a son, Juan Manuel Pablo, a few years older than her. Said they were estranged. Didn't say why. And he never mentioned the string of women he'd loved and left. Not then. He invited her to move into one of his homes, closer to the business districts where she managed operations for both the cosmetics and now his restaurant and wine company as well. He said it would make her job easier, and truthfully, it did. It was a beautiful home, sleek, modern, surrounded by palm trees and sunlight. There, she had her own bedroom, her own office, and privacy. But even with all that space, Alejandro was always close. They were not quite lovers, not yet, but the chemistry between them was becoming impossible to ignore. And neither of them knew that in just a few days. Juan Manuel Pablo would return home, and that would change everything.
Chapter 3. Collision Course. The midday sun glared over the sprawling Pablo estate, casting long shadows across its manicured lawns. Inside the glass-walled living room, the tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Juan Manuel Pablo leaned against the marble counter, arms crossed tightly over his chest, watching the new intruder in his life with undisguised contempt. Desiree Morales stood calmly in the center of the room, her posture unshaken despite the storm of judgment swirling in Juan's eyes. She had chosen a simple dress, elegant but unpretentious, yet somehow it still felt like her very presence was a provocation. "So you're the one," Juan said finally, voice like cold steel. "The flavor of the month, my father's newest charity case." Desiree's gaze narrowed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he replied, taking a slow sip from the whiskey glass in his hand. "You and your kind. You come in all polished and grateful. Until the claws come out. It's textbook." She gave a humorless laugh. "You must be Juan Manuel. I was told you were direct, but this is just rude. And you must be the reason my father suddenly wants to play house again," Juan snapped. "Or did you already convince him to put your name on a few properties?" Desiree's eyes flared. You have no idea who I am. Exactly, and I intend to keep it that way. The room fell into a silence so sharp it could cut skin. From a corner, the housekeeper paused mid-step, then wisely disappeared down the hallway. Juan turned his back to Desiree, already bored with the exchange, but not before throwing one last dagger over his shoulder. "Women like you killed my mother," he said flatly. Desiree's breath caught. She wasn't expecting that. He didn't explain further, and she didn't ask. But it lingered. That bitterness, that wound, left hanging between them like smoke that would not clear. Just then, Alejandro Pablo entered the room, breaking the silence with his usual easy charm. "I see the two of you have met," he said with a smile, completely oblivious to the flames still simmering beneath the surface. Desiree stepped away without responding. Juan didn't even look at her again. They were done talking. For now. Chapter 4. The Invader at Pablo's Estate. Juan Manuel. Pablo stood by the open window of his room, the cool evening breeze stirring the blinds as he watched the lights flicker on in the upper floors of the mansion. His father had told him over the phone that he was home and had someone he wanted him to meet. That was unusual. Alejandro Pablo had never bothered introducing any of his flings to his son. This woman had to be different. Juan had keys to the house, as always. It was still his home, even if he rarely stayed. The mansion was expansive, modern, and cold in its silence. His room remained on the lower level, near the entrance, separate from the master suite, above where his father and the new mistress now resided. She appeared in the foyer, walking confidently beside Alejandro. Desiree Morales. Juan stared at her from the staircase without a word, analyzing her from head to toe. She was beautiful, yes. Young, too. Barely Juan, older than her by 3 years, if that. She didn't look like the others. There was a quiet elegance in her movements, something refined yet strong. But Juan's expression stayed flat, even hostile. "This is Desiree," Alejandro said, placing a hand gently on her back. "She's been staying here for a while. I want you two to get along." Juan scoffed softly under his breath and gave a dry nod. "Of course, Dad." Desiree extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you, Juan Manuel." He took one glance at it and walked past her, brushing her shoulder with his as he ascended the stairs. During dinner, Desiree Morales sat at the far end of the grand dining room, her back straight, her expression unreadable as she toyed with the hem of her linen napkin. The long mahogany table stretched between her and the rest of the Pablo family, like a chasm, lined with candles, expensive silverware, and uncomfortable silences. Alejandro had gone all out again. Chefs, servers, and rare wine. As if opulence could mend fractures that were never meant to be whole. Juan Manuel sat diagonally across from her, swirling his glass of Bordeaux with a tight jaw and eyes that flicked over her every few minutes like she was some kind of invader. "I hope the lamb is to your liking," Alejandro said, breaking the silence. "Imported from New Zealand." Desiree gave a small nod. "It's perfect. Everything is lovely." Juan made a noise in his throat. Not quite a cough. Not quite subtle. She didn't even look at him. "Is there a problem?" "No," he said, setting down his wine. "I just think it's impressive how easily some people adapt to new environments. Like chameleons. Especially when there's expensive wine and rare meat involved." Alejandro's face tensed. "Juan." "No, let him speak," Desiree interrupted coolly. She turned to face Juan directly for the first time that evening. "You clearly have something to say. You've had that look since I arrived. Why don't we get it over with?" Juan leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "Fine. I think you're here for his money. I think women like you, young, beautiful, conveniently independent, know exactly how to play men like him. And I think my mother died watching women like you tear her marriage apart." Silence fell, cold and heavy. Desiree's hands tightened around her napkin. "I see. So this isn't about me. This is about your mother." Juan's eyes narrowed. "It's about the pattern. My father has a type. He calls it passion. I call it selfishness. Maybe your father's mistakes aren't mine to carry," she said, her voice calm but clipped. "You don't know me. You just assume. That's your problem. And frankly, not my burden." Alejandro slammed his glass down, startling them both. "That's enough, from both of you." But Juan had already pushed back his chair and stood. "You invited her into this family like she was just another guest. Don't be surprised when she doesn't leave." He strode out without another word, the echo of his footsteps ringing through the hall. Desiree sat still for a long moment, her chest tight with unspoken rage. She hadn't expected instant acceptance, but this open hostility, this seething resentment, it was exhausting. Alejandro sighed, placing a hand gently over hers. "He'll come around." She smiled bitterly. "I'm not here for him, remember that." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't that simple. And something told her Juan's hatred wasn't going away anytime soon.
Getting rid of the invader. Over the following days, Juan made no effort to hide his disdain. He left messes in the kitchen, half-eaten meals on the counter, empty bottles scattered across the hall. His goal was simple: frustrate her enough to leave. Desiree handled it with forced grace, until she couldn't. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, she found the stove crusted with dried oil and the sink piled high with unwashed dishes. A sour rage brewed inside her. Marching through the hall, she found Juan sprawled on the couch, lazily flipping through a sports channel. "You've got to be kidding me," she snapped. "Are you allergic to soap, or just raised like a pig?" Juan didn't flinch. "This isn't your house. If you don't like it, leave." "Oh, I see. The spoiled son of a rich man thinks manners are optional." He turned to her with a smirk. "Better than being a gold digger playing house with someone old enough to be your father?" Desiree's cheeks flushed red. "You think I'm here for his money?" "Aren't you? Don't act surprised. I've seen your type before. My mother died because of women like you." Silence fell between them like a sword. That wound in him, raw, unhealed, was laid bare. But Desiree was done being polite. "Your bitterness is not my burden, Juan. Your father brought me here, not the other way around. If you have daddy issues, deal with them. Just don't take them out on me." They glared at each other, the air between them thick with mutual loathing. The house became a battlefield. Juan's passive aggression intensified. Dirty plates, loud late-night sex with strangers, snide remarks whispered just loud enough for Desiree to hear. She fought back in her own way, reporting him to Mr. Pablo, insisting on boundaries, throwing his own arrogance back in his face whenever they crossed paths. And yet, beneath all the tension, something was shifting. One night, Juan crept into the kitchen, drawn by hunger and the low murmur of a voice. He paused in the hallway, recognizing Desiree's voice as she spoke softly on the phone. I love him, Anna. I really do. But I can't keep doing this. I thought he'd change. I waited. But it's the same, just like the others. Juan froze. Her voice was thick with emotion. He'd never heard her like this, vulnerable, broken. She wasn't who he thought she was. His breath caught as he heard Mr. Pablo's footsteps coming down the stairs. Juan hid in the shadows as his father approached Desiree. There was a quiet confrontation, her fury restrained, his confusion palpable. Juan didn't stay to listen. He slipped back into his room, something heavy pressing on his chest. From that night forward, Juan's behavior shifted. The hostility softened. He cleaned up after himself, stopped bringing women home, and started lingering in the shared spaces. He watched sports quietly, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen when Desiree moved inside. She ignored him. One morning, she walked past him like he was invisible. "Do you still hate me that much?" he asked suddenly, standing. She didn't reply. Her eyes were tired, guarded. She focused on her breakfast preparations, trying to push him out of her mind. He moved closer, almost too close. "Desiree, I know we started off wrong. I was wrong about you. I'm sorry." She turned to face him, her voice sharp. "I don't care what you think of me. Stay away from me. I mean it." He reached out, gently taking her wrist. "I know about my dad. I heard you that night. I didn't know." Her eyes widened. Then, without hesitation, she yanked her hand free and slapped him hard across the face. "Don't ever touch me again." She stormed off. But even as Juan held his stinging cheek, he remained still, struck not by the slap, but by the way her eyes lingered on him for that split second. That was the moment he realized he was falling for her. And for Desiree, who now avoided him like a curse, there was no denying it anymore. This was no longer just about hatred. It was something far more dangerous. Chapter 6. The Heat Between Us. It was Saturday morning. The mansion was unusually quiet. Sunlight streamed lazily through the tall windows, casting golden streaks across the marble floors. Outside, the garden was alive with birdsong and rustling leaves, but inside, the air felt thick, tense, almost expectant. Desiree was in the kitchen, barefoot in a soft cotton robe, her hair loosely tied up. She moved like she was trying to keep her mind busy, flipping eggs, buttering toast, brewing coffee, anything to avoid thinking too deeply. But the ache in her chest wouldn't go away. Not after the last few days. Not after the way Juan Manuel had looked at her, touched her, spoken her name like it meant something. Juan was already awake, seated in the hallway lounge with the television on, pretending to watch the sports channel. But he hadn't processed a single moment of it. He was just watching her. She'd passed him twice already without a word. He didn't even blame her. What had he expected? That she would smile? That she would forgive? That she could somehow forget all the ways he'd taunted her when she first arrived? The sneering jokes, the possessive glances, the tension he created with his mere presence. But now it was different. Now he wanted her, and not in the reckless, bored way he'd wanted so many women before. This was something else. A slow ache in his chest, a pulse in his neck every time she entered the room, a hunger that kept him awake at night. He stood up. He followed her. In the kitchen, Desiree was humming faintly to herself, but it stopped the moment she heard his footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She kept her eyes on the pan. Juan hesitated, then stepped closer. So close he could almost feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Do you still hate me that much?" he asked quietly. his voice low and raw. That you can't even say hi when you walk past me? She didn't respond, just kept cooking like he wasn't there. Am I that inhuman to you? He added, his tone barely above a whisper now. Still, nothing. That silence, that cold avoidance, it broke something in him. He stepped closer, his breath mingling with hers. She finally turned to face him, eyes blazing. What the hell is wrong with you, Juan? She snapped. What do you want from me? I just want to talk. I don't want to talk. But he kept coming closer, not touching her, just hovering. Her chest was rising and falling now, the tension palpable. Get away from me, she said, moving around him toward the sink. He followed. I said... She turned suddenly, her hand flashing across his cheek. Another slap, sharp and loud in the silence of the kitchen. His jaw tensed. He didn't flinch. And then... He stepped forward and cupped her face with both hands, his eyes locking into hers like gravity. Stop running, he whispered. Before she could move, before she could breathe, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was deep, fierce, raw, with everything they'd been holding back. At first, Desiree froze, shocked, her body stiff against him. But then, her lips parted, her body softened. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. He deepened the kiss, tasting her with desperation and fire, until finally, as if afraid of what he might do next, he pulled away. She stood there breathless, her lips still tingling, her eyes wide and unreadable. She stared at him like he was something dangerous, something she couldn't afford to want. Juan didn't move. He just watched her. She touched her lips, almost in disbelief. And then, without a word, she turned and rushed out of the kitchen, the soft thud of her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Juan didn't follow. He heard the door to her bedroom close, then lock. Inside, Desiree leaned against the door, her chest heaving. Her fingers traced her lips again, as if trying to erase the memory or memorize it. She didn't know what shocked her more, the fact that she didn't stop him, or the fact that she didn't want.
Chapter 7. A Dangerous Longing. Desiree lay on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, her lips still tingling from the memory of Juan's kiss. She touched them again with her fingertips, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her heart was racing, but not from anger this time. From confusion, from the way his mouth had felt on hers, how her body had betrayed her mind and surrendered to that moment. I hate him, she whispered to herself. But the words felt weak, hollow, like a lie she'd repeated too many times to believe anymore. No, the truth was something else. Maybe she was in denial. Maybe she was starting to feel something dangerous, something thrilling. Juan, meanwhile, paced outside in the hallway, his chest rising and falling with adrenaline. He couldn't believe he had done it. He'd kissed her. Not just a brush of lips, but a deep, burning kiss, full of everything he hadn't been able to say. But now, he feared it might have ruined everything. What if she hated him even more? What if he'd pushed her further away? Still, for that one moment, he had felt her surrender. He knew she felt it too. Desiree didn't leave her room the rest of that day. Not for lunch, not for dinner. She stayed locked inside, trying to regain control of herself, of her emotions, of her body. She couldn't face Juan. Not yet. The memory of his eyes, the intensity in them, left her shaken. It wasn't just lust. It was more. It was connection. The rest of the weekend passed like a slow-burning fire. Desiree did everything to avoid Juan. If she heard his footsteps, she turned in the other direction. If she felt his eyes on her, she pretended not to notice. But she noticed. God, she noticed. She caught him watching her, not just glancing, but staring. His gaze lingered on her body, undressing her without touching her. There was something raw and unfiltered in the way he looked at her now. Like he saw her, not as his father's mistress, but as a woman he couldn't resist. And it was getting harder for her to resist, too. One morning, she bent over to pick something up in the living room, and when she stood up, Juan was right there. Not too close, but close enough to feel his presence. Their eyes locked. She tried to look away, but she couldn't. He wasn't saying a word, just watching her with that same intense expression that made her knees weak. She rushed to her room. Again. By Monday, the tension was unbearable. Desiree came home from work early, too early, trying to avoid a late evening encounter. Juan was at the hall, as usual, half watching the TV, half tapping away on his laptop. She walked in, said a curt, "Hi," and tried to walk past. But Juan stood up, closing the distance between them. She was still in her office outfit, a sleek fitted blouse and a high-waist pencil skirt that hugged her curves. Her heels clicked softly against the tile, but stopped short when she felt his hand gently catch her wrist. "Desiree," he said. Just her name, but it carried weight. Desire, longing, a silent plea. She didn't move. He stepped closer. The air around them seemed to hum. "You look so beautiful," he said, his voice husky. "I can't stop thinking about you." She turned her face away, but not fast enough to stop him from seeing the way her lips parted slightly. "Juan, this can't happen," she said quietly, still not looking at him. But he touched her waist, firmly, deliberately, and pulled her closer. She gasped softly, not because of fear, but because of how right it felt, and how wrong. Their mouths met again. This time, there was no hesitation. His hands gripped her tighter, molding her body into his. Their kiss deepened, grew more desperate, their breathing heavier, clothes rustling as their bodies pressed together. They stumbled toward the couch, lips locked, hands exploring. Juan's jacket fell to the floor. Her blouse was half undone. Her skirt rode high on her thighs. They were seconds away from making love when Desiree suddenly broke away. "No," she gasped, standing up and backing away. I can't do this." Juan sat still, stunned, breathless. Desiree pulled her blouse closed, tears rising in her eyes. "This is wrong. I'm still with your father. I can't be that woman. I won't be that woman." "But we can't lie to ourselves, Desiree," Juan said, standing up. "We feel this. I feel it. Don't you?" She shook her head and turned, walking briskly to her room. The sound of her door locking echoed through the silence. For the next 3 days, Desiree avoided Juan completely. She no longer sat in the living room. No more movies. No more accidental glances. She came home late, said nothing, slipped past him like a ghost. When he tried to say hello, she kept walking. When he reached out to touch her arm, she flinched. When their eyes accidentally met, she looked away so quickly it stung. Juan was crushed. He replayed everything over and over. The kiss, her words, the way her body had responded to his. But now, she was gone again, behind that emotional wall, unreachable. And yet, the tension hadn't faded. It had only deepened. Desiree couldn't sleep. Juan couldn't focus. And both of them knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. Chapter 8. The Jealous Flame. The days that followed were torture, for both of them. Desiree did everything she could to avoid Juan. After that night, when passion had nearly consumed them both, she felt like she was losing control of everything she thought she knew. She didn't trust herself anymore. Not around him. Not with the way he looked at her, like she was the only woman on earth. She would come home from work, mutter a distracted hi, and breeze past him like a ghost, refusing to meet his eyes or let him touch her. For 3 straight days, she avoided every attempt Juan made to talk to her, to hold her, to even look at her. But her heart, her body, her mind, they betrayed her more and more each day. Juan, on the other hand, was unraveling. He had never felt this helpless. His desire for her had taken a life of its own. Every room she entered felt warmer, electric. Every movement she made was poetry in motion. The way she brushed past him, even coldly, sent heat through his veins. At night, sleep became impossible. He started taking hot shots just to ease his nerves. But the alcohol did nothing to tame the ache. He would lie awake, thinking about her, about the taste of her lips, the fire in her eyes, and the way she melted in his arms before she pulled away. He was falling, hard and fast. Desiree couldn't keep it all in any longer. One evening, she called her closest friend Anastasia, Anna, and spilled everything. "I don't know what's happening to me," Desiree admitted as she curled up in bed, her voice low and conflicted. "He kissed me, and I let him, and I liked it. No, I loved it. Anna, I can't stop thinking about him." Anna was stunned silent at first. Then she burst into laughter, not out of mockery, but pure disbelief. "You mean Juan? The same Juan you told me you wanted to slap into next week not too long ago?" "I know," Desiree groaned. "That's what makes it worse. I hated him. But now, Anna, he looks at me like he sees everything I've tried to hide. And when he touches me, I can't breathe." Anna was still chuckling, but she softened her tone. "Girl, you've got it bad. Real bad. But damn, I never thought I'd live to hear you say this." Desiree sighed. "Neither did I." To make things more complicated, Mr. Pablo had been gone far longer than he originally said he would. Almost 5 months now. Desiree hadn't heard from him in weeks, and she was beginning to realize how little she missed him. Her thoughts were consumed by his son instead, by the fire in Juan's eyes, the desperation in his touch, the ache in his voice when he said he loved her. But the universe wasn't going to make it easy. That Saturday afternoon, just when Desiree thought things couldn't get any more emotionally tangled, the doorbell rang. Juan opened the door, and standing there in a tight red dress, with a bright smile and lipstick as bold as her attitude, was Rachel, one of the women Juan used to bring home for casual flings. "Hey, baby," Rachel purred as she pulled Juan into a kiss before he could react. The noise and Rachel's loud, sugary voice drew Desiree out of her room. She quietly peeked from the staircase and froze. Rachel. Of course. Desiree watched the scene unfold from above. The kiss, the way Rachel clung to Juan's arm, her shameless flirtation. She felt a strange, burning knot in her stomach. Jealousy. That was the only word for it. The sight of Juan with another woman, especially that woman, felt like someone lit a fire beneath her skin. She turned away, angrily, and stormed into the kitchen, slamming the fridge shut louder than necessary. Juan noticed. He could feel her presence even before she walked into the room. He wanted to explain, wanted to run to her and tell her Rachel meant nothing. But Rachel was already making herself comfortable in the living room, giggling at some TV drama. Desiree didn't want to play games. She walked into the kitchen like a storm, and Juan followed a few moments later. He found her pouring a glass of juice, her expression guarded and cold. "She's not my girlfriend," Juan said immediately, his voice low and urgent. "I swear to you, Desiree. Rachel, she's just someone from the past. She means nothing." Desiree didn't look at him. "I don't care, Juan. Do whatever you want." Her tone was sharp, but her heart was aching. She hated how jealous she felt, hated that she even cared. But the truth was too raw to face. "Please," he said, stepping closer. "Look at me." "No," she replied, barely above a whisper. "Leave me alone." Juan stood there, wounded. He didn't know what hurt more, her words, or the way she refused to even look him in the eye. Frustrated, he backed away and left the kitchen without a word. He didn't even return to Rachel, who was still waiting in the living room. Eventually, Rachel noticed his absence and wandered toward the kitchen, finding Desiree instead. "Hey, is Juan upstairs?" Rachel asked casually, tilting her head. Desiree didn't look up. "Probably," she said coldly. "I think he went to his room." Rachel shrugged, turned off the TV, and headed up to find him. Desiree stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands clenched on the counter, heart hammering. She knew what was about to happen upstairs, at least what Rachel would try to make happen, and the thought filled her with an emotion she didn't want to name. But the truth was undeniable. She didn't just want Juan. She loved him. And now, she might have to watch him slip through her fingers just like that.
The moonlight whispers through the trees. A tender breeze carries secret pleas. Shadows dance on the velvet ground. In this moment where love is found, the stars above hum a quiet tune. Hearts collide beneath the silver moon. A flame ignites, gentle yet so wild. Two souls entwined, pure and beguiled. A touch that lingers, soft as a sigh. Eyes locked, unspoken words that lie. Electric tension in the midnight air. A love so raw, beyond compare. Dissolves, it's just you and me, caught adrift in a boundless sea. Time stands still as we softly sway in the glow of our own ballet. The organ sighs a melancholic moan. Every note whispers you're not alone. A harmony born of passion's embrace, carved in the silence, etched on our face. The dawn may break, but this fire will stay. Echoes of love won't fade away. Through the shadows, through the light, our eternal flame will burn tonight.